Welcome to the Emerge Collaborative podcast. I'm Falon.
And I'm Rachel.
Together, we share more than 2 decades of experience working with young adults on college campuses.
So on this podcast, we're engaging the questions we hear in our ministry to better equip those who care for the emerging adults in their lives.
We are here today with Jonathan Opsahl. Jonathan is a personal trainer, a certified coach, and the owner of a gym. He has a background in ministry, business, and sports med, and he has worked and trained on college campuses for almost 10 years. He also happens to be my younger brother, and we are really grateful to have him here. I can attest that he is a very cool person all around. Welcome, Jonathan. We're so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Jonathan, we often hear, I think either directly or just implicitly, that Jesus cares about souls and Jesus cares about the state of our heart. Some people might say our spirit, right? We don't really hear much about our body. Why does caring for our physical body matter in the Christian life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll preface this with, I think, what will be a theme of a lot of what we'll end up talking about, which is the concept of integrity, and that the model we are given for living a life well led is one of integrity. And so a lot of our systems are integrated. Our emotional life, our spiritual life, our physical life, everything is integrated. And so I think on that end, it becomes really apparent that these things bleed into one another. But I'll kind of start with the direct answer with that is we see a lot of usage of the physical body in Jesus' ministry. A lot of what he does is heal in a very real sense, bringing sight back, bringing removing disabilities that are hindering people from participating in society. And I don't think that's an accident or a coincidence or just something that was true in ancient time. I think it's really evident in scripture that there's a lot of care for our physical bodies because it is a universal language, right? And so it falls, or not even falls outside of it, encompasses all of the different cultural nuances there might be, or differences across whatever lines there might be, but everyone can relate to the human experience of regaining something physically that was lost, whether that is personal or that is someone that they know. And so I think in the healing aspect of Jesus' ministry, we see that pretty evident that he cares about that and recognizes the value in our ability to engage fully with each other, with creation, with everything else, using our bodies as a way to do that. Kind of more deeply, and why I like what I do, especially being a trainer and helping develop physical fitness and capacity, is more connected to that integrated piece that I was talking about. We feel we are embodied with what our emotions are doing and what our mental state is doing and what stress looks like and all these things. Like we have physical reactions to them when we're grieving, when we're hurting, also when we're experiencing elation and joy. Like all this is a very physically embodied component of the human condition. And so when we improve the physical well-being, to me, it's a way of tapping into greater depths of the human experience. This might be tangential, but I think one of the reasons why it's overlooked or can be overlooked by a lot of Christians is I think it can be assumed a little too much of what we're doing to take care of our bodies. I don't know if that's cultural or just the fact that we're in the modern era, and so we don't have to face a lot of the challenges. In addition to that, we're also a little removed. I think there was a lot within Jesus' time that was like, given that you're moving your body. If we think about what most people were doing as far as their professions, like movement and activity was a lot more woven into the fabric of everyday life. It didn't need to be as explicitly stated, whereas now we have to translate that a little bit to going out of our way to exercise or to train or to think about what we're eating in ways that are a little disconnected than I think from societies back then. But yeah, I think there's a lot of connections with that.
I think it's really interesting to think about how culturally the way we view our bodies, and particularly this idea of integration, is really important and apt for this particular moment. And it is true that we talk about ourselves as disintegrated selves, as we, I feel things with my emotions. I am tending to my heart. I am caring for my soul, or Jesus cares about what happens to my soul. And my body's just kind of this average temporary vessel that is carrying the important stuff. But I think sometimes we have a Platonist view of that body, that it is really kind of holding us back really from what's most important, which is the soul and the heart and reason and that kind of thing, the mind. How have you thought about that? I would love to hear more about this idea of integration, and particularly how you have included your body as part of your worship to God and not as this thing that is holding you back from experiencing whatever it is God has in store for us.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of richness to that, I think. I guess I'll start with something I think we can all kind of relate to, and that's even just in the vocabulary or terminology that we use when we're describing different mental or emotional states. And a lot of our analogies are on carrying weight or having a weight on our chest or carrying a burden or feeling low. And on the other side, feeling really light, feeling energetic. All of these states that we might try to silo into emotional state, mental state, that are non-physical, when we have a more awareness to it, they're actually very physical. And we use that in our language to describe that. And so I think that is maybe the first doorway to realize that we are embodied creatures and this is an integrated system. And we were designed with a very integrated system, both as humans with our bodies and our emotions and everything we experience, and our place within the world and within creation. It is all an integrated system, and it's going to have effects on those things. Some of those routes I see where health and fitness training translate over to deepening our understanding of the rest of the human experience, our emotions and our mental state. For example, when you're working out, you are regularly encountered with your heart rate going up and your breathing rate going up and muscles burning and things being challenging and hard. And that forces your focus more internally in the sense of what is actually going on in your body. And I've seen that translate both in myself and with people I work with in a greater awareness of what's going on. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, I'm nervous about something, like my heart rate's going up.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't have words for that. Sometimes we actually experience the physical response first. And you can find yourself in a situation where like, my palms are sweaty, my heart rate's elevated. What is this? And when you have regular experience with that, you start to listen to what your body's telling you, and then you get to actually interact with that and have a discussion with it and use that as a tool, as opposed to it just being an unknown you're trying to figure out. It's less mysterious. It's a lot more helpful, and you're on the same side, whether it's positive or negative. For myself, physical movement has been maybe the primary way that I've found ways to connect with God in a personal way and with others. So I'll kind of start on a bigger level, just having shared experience, right? We're constantly seeking community. And I think all of us who have worked in ministry can harp on the necessity for finding community, and particularly community that we have a real sense of belonging, a real sense of trust, all of those things. And from my experience, there is nothing better to form bonds than a shared challenging experience. And a lot of times in life that happens because we're dealt a hand that we're not expected, right? We go through adversity or something that wasn't expected. And the people who were with us in that, we end up being bonded to. We can emulate that through something like physical training because we get to, in a controlled environment, expose people to a challenge and to physical adversity. And when you share that with people over and over, you actually get to know people really well, really fast.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that actions speak louder than words in a lot of ways. It's like you want to see what yourself or what someone else is made of, and you go through a similar experience. And so I've seen just a huge diversity of people become legitimate friends just from working out together who you otherwise would never expect to like know each other, let alone like seek to hang out on the weekends with or share life with or turn to when things get rough or celebrate with. And so the community aspect's been really big for me, especially. And so my closest friends, closest community, and sharing faith with all of that has happened through physical fitness. With me, it's just been a way to connect as well. I've felt a deepening of my own experience with that and being more attuned to what's going on, using that as an outlet and recognizing when things might feel out of balance. And for other people, like training and working out is something that like is that's the chore for me. I like that. And so that's a space that I can return to and check in and use as a barometer for other things that are going on in my life. The opposite can be true for other people because really it's all related. And so if I have a regular barometer and showing up on how my energy feels, how my attitude feels, how my outlook on this is, how my sleep has been, like a workout can actually be so much more than just workout. It can be a chance to check in on all those things. And that's how it served me. And being an indicator of, hey, maybe I need to give more attention to this, or yeah, this has really been weighing on my mind. And now that I have the clarity of moving my body and kind of put myself in a more peaceful state or reset state, I can look at it a little more objectively or a little more truthfully. But also spending time by yourself, spending time alone, spending time out in creation, like all of that, it opens up experiences to connect with others and ultimately connect with God more. Yeah. It's almost numerous. We could go on for a long time.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that with you in fitness classes that you've trained. And I really appreciate the way it definitely happens organically because of what's happening. But I feel like you are also really gifted at facilitating that in spaces. So I really appreciate that about you too.
Yeah, when you were talking, it reminded me of, there was a time when I was part of like just the local YMCA, and I would like go in and see the same people every day, and, you know, got to know a lot of them. And in our town, the YMCA was kind of where like a lot of older people went to work out. And there were like trendier gyms that I think younger people would go to, but we couldn't afford them. So we went to the YMCA, and I became friends with all of these people who were like in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. And we'd do like yoga classes together, and they would like tell me about their kids and grandkids who were like my age, you know, and it was a really sweet, like intergenerational experience that I absolutely felt like I was being drawn closer to God by seeing the ways that like people in my neighborhood were all coming together around this like shared interest and shared experience. And it was super cool. But I don't know if I would have framed it that way if you hadn't said that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about how fitness and caring for your body through physical activity has helped you know God better. Caring for our bodies, like you said, is so much bigger than just like doing a workout regularly, even though that's a really important part. I'm curious how nutrition has also played in for you, of caring for your body through what you bring into your body has also played a role in helping you feel closer to God and even using that as an act of worship, perhaps.
Yeah. It's a really good question. So with this idea of fitness and why that's so useful a lot of the times, kind of back to this idea of it being a universal language, it's really easy for people to see results physically. So you improve their physical capacity or anything with that, and their quality of life goes up, and they can see that happen. What's nice about that and what you brought up is that opens the door then to start to consider other things that might be contributing to their quality of life. And so usually the first thing in relation to fitness is this idea of nutrition. And oftentimes that starts on the very direct and what could be isolated arena of my performance in the gym or my workouts. I want to make sure I'm fueling myself right. So what does that look like? When I hear that, like what's really exciting to me is that the first door has even just been like cracked open, and we're now expanding beyond just a physical training session. And now we get to talk about something bigger. And I know that that's just like the first domino of many to now consider what's contributing to your quality of life and how you're showing up for everything. But to talk about nutrition, I'll give a little framework on how we think about our physical training and really the like foundations that it's laid on. And so what I do for my work is help people get more fit, physically fit. And so with that, there's really systems in the body we're trying to train, there's skills we're trying to learn, there are capacities we're trying to retrieve. And so that's what's happening when we are in the gym primarily. That is really built on the foundation of nutrition. And that is all built on the foundation of lifestyle. And lifestyle, we could put in all these other things like sleep and social connections and stress management and all that stuff. And so first directed to that, if we talk about all of the importance of physical training and how that translates to our spiritual lives and the rest of our lives, nutrition is the foundation it is built on. And so from a mechanical perspective of this, or just talking about this priority, like if what we're training is what we're doing with our body to produce a result, like that is the fuel going in. So that's going to have an absolute connection to that. There's also going to be direct impacts on what you're putting in your body, on the state of mind we're in, on how our energy is feeling, on some neurochemical reactions happening. So there's also a biological component to nutrition that's going to impact mental and emotional states. We can see that with, especially when we observe little kids, for example, right? Like when they have a lot of sugar, there's like a super high rush and then like really big crash. That's not just because they're kids, right? It's just because the regulation of that looks differently. Like, but it's really clear when we look at other stuff, what we put into our body has a very clear component on that. What that ties into more though is now, again, this idea of bringing more awareness to what's going on. And that goes a lot more with just eating the right amount of protein, carbs, or fat, or having the veggies or anything like that. It is a step deeper into living a quality life. And when we think about this idea of integrity and the model that I think we're given through scripture and through the Christian life, we can expect that if things aren't integrated and we go deeper into that, it's probably going to point us in the direction of involving other things,
right,
and pulling that in. What I mean by that is the stuff that is nutritionally best for us is also best for like the world, like for creation and for our mental state and for our emotional state. Yeah. And for the earth. And so deepening the awareness of that starts to open up all of these doors to really see like, wow, this is actually a lot bigger than just what I'm looking at. So when I sit down and my conversations with some of my clients start off with, yeah, you need to eat more protein. And okay, well, what is quality protein? And you start talking about that. Well, why is what I'm buying from the grocery store not good? And all of a sudden we're talking about how animal welfare plays into the quality of food that you're eating. And so there's just so much deepness and richness to these conversations that really like quickly fold outward into a much, much bigger conversation. But with nutrition in general, and I brought up the lifestyle component is because eating plays such a huge role in our lives, right? And so, and we see this in scripture too, sharing a meal means a lot. And so if we can have appreciation for and care for and consideration for what is getting put on the table and ultimately getting put into our bodies, just the awareness piece is going to have some positive aspects, but much greater than that is just this better understanding that it matters. And right, truth, as you get deeper into that, what it means to healthily pursue that, we start to develop a much more solid foundation into approaching those things.
Yeah, that's really
profound.
profound.
So that may have stayed a little meta for what you're asking, but
no, that's great.
But yeah, I think that's one of the more critical components of it.
I think that's great because it really looks at a lot of the more deeply held values that we have and how that plays out in every ordinary choice we make, including the foods we eat and the ways we move our bodies throughout our days. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan, you've worked a lot with college students and young adults. And of course, on a college campus, sometimes it's challenging to make healthy decisions when it comes to like eating in a cafeteria every day and things like that. We also know that on college campuses, things like eating disorders and body dysmorphia are really common with teens, but then also even moving into emerging adulthood and in college, that can be particularly challenging. I'm wondering, how do you navigate that component of it as you're especially talking with college students and young adults about developing these habits early to contribute to their overall well-being and to their relationship with God and themselves, while also being sensitive to that piece of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really pertinent question to, especially I think the environment that we're in on college campuses, especially. And I think the way you ask that question kind of nails it right on the head. And that is the habits or the mindset behind it is the first thing to approach. And so in a lot of the ways that conversations in ministry might be around, well, how are we thinking about who God is and who we are in light of that? Similar conversations need to happen in the context of our physical well-being and our nutrition, how we're feeling those things. And so with that, the first approach is really to bring to the surface, what are the narratives we're operating on? Because there can be on the outside what looks like good action or positive action, but if it's for the wrong motivation, we know like ultimately that's not going to go the way we want it to. And it's not going to bring the results that we're looking for.
Right.
And so right from the jump, we need to explore what are the guiding narratives or beliefs or values around what our bodies can do, what our bodies are for, how we're fueling ourselves or what that's for. because that's going to set their trajectory on if this is going to be healthy, sustainable long term, or if this is going to be, you know, a lifetime of kind of roller coaster work with that. And so there's kind of two components that I think are really critical to exactly what you just asked. One of them is a discipline thing. And so that's one of the qualities that I think gets the most positive developments from physical training and learning how to fuel your body well and nutrition, is having the discipline to say yes to things you might otherwise not say yes to, and say no to things you might otherwise not say, or might not otherwise say no to. And so having the discipline to create habits, stick to them, and all of those things. And there's a population to which that is maybe the primary message that needs to be heard, is like, this is a discipline issue and needing to go to that. Obviously, there are components to that and very legitimate struggles and disorders with that need to be addressed. And so one of the other components that I think is really critical is looking at why are you training and eating the way you are? And can we replace that with a more healthy framework of understanding what that is? And so the type of training that I do, that I lead people in, that I participate in, that I encourage everyone I talk to do, is a performance-based fitness over an aesthetic-based fitness. Performance, right? We can, if our lights or flags are going off on the problems or potential problems with a performance-based thing, it's really just what we're using to say, like, we are going to care more about what you are able to do, and understanding that we are trying to build the functionality of your body as the primary focus, because and that is actually a design originated like lens to look at, of saying our bodies were created for something really good, to be able to run and jump and lift and do all these things, and we want to up our capacity in these things that our body was built to do. What that looks like in an actual training space, which is important. Like, none of the gyms that I train in, or the one that I now have, has mirrors in it. And it's not because there's something horrible or evil about mirrors, but it's symbolic of the culture around that, or what we're really focusing on. And it is not what you look like and what other people look like, or other people looking at you, which are the primary factors that contribute to body dysmorphia and all these kind of negative consequences, or negative aspects we just associate with the fitness industry, but rather, are we pursuing and are we celebrating increased capacity for yourself? And that is a really, really important approach. That same thing is true with nutrition, right? Like, we are not seeking to learn how to fuel ourselves to look a certain way. We're seeking to fuel ourselves to support the design that we have been given. And so our nutrition should reflect then healthy living, both in our life. Like, we have indicators of healthy living in what our energy looks like, what our attitudes about ourselves look like, how we're showing up for people, how sustainable our approach is to that. And also the medical side. Like, if you go into the doctor, your test results should also be reflective of that. And so the framework that I train people in, that I molded this stuff after, all of the methodology after, is for that, is built from the function and design we've been given, and trying to elevate to that design that we've been given. And that's where a lot of personal connection comes in, right? We don't have a knowledge shortage of things, right? Like, we can go anywhere and see what we should do or what's optimal or anything. And so really the gap to allow someone to make hurdles like that, especially talking about eating disorders or body dysmorphia, that's going to come from personal connection. And so having a model or someone to walk alongside you to help reshape how you're viewing yourself and how you're viewing your physical well-being, that's going to be a critical component. And so again, this is what I mean by, like, everything is so integrated within one another. But yeah, obviously extremely prevalent and on college campuses particularly, that I hope more people give attention to.
That's really good. You talked about celebrating people's increased capacities. And I've just, like, watched you train people of a huge diversity of fitness abilities, experience, and background with athleticism and various kinds of abilities, and people with various disabilities, including myself when I was 6, 7, 8 months pregnant. And I was working out with you, and the ways that you cared for me with a temporary, somewhat disability, and helped people celebrate what their bodies were able to do, even when they come in sometimes with very different starting points or very different bodies that may be able to do different things at various capacities, even at maximum usage. So I appreciate that about you, that celebrating capacity and celebrating progress has been a really big part of your ministry as you train. I think of a couple other challenges to this. My algorithm occasionally gets confused and shows me videos of Christian gym bro culture. And I don't know if you've ever seen these videos before, but they're videos of people who are kind of crossing that line of what is the line between like worshiping with our bodies, embodied worship, and starting to toe the line of worshiping our bodies and worshiping our appearances. And even sometimes the messages that come with some of those videos are messages that are kind of like a fitness prosperity gospel, that if my body can do good things and look a certain way, I am good. And if my body, or if your body can't, then it is sinful, or, God isn't with me, or it's almost like this fitness prosperity gospel sometimes comes with that. But the other end of the spectrum, where any sort of fitness, any sort of care for our bodies is vanity, that's also incorrect. How do you balance these two sides of these equally false and equally damaging stories that are also very different and on opposite sides of the spectrum?
Yeah, that's maybe the biggest question around the whole fitness industry, right? It's like, and the issue with algorithms specifically, just to touch on that, is the algorithm will show you probably what you don't need to hear, right? It's what you want to hear, but it's probably what you don't need to hear. And so, like you said, there's an imbalance there, likely because we've kind of fallen into some echo chambers and followed that to the extreme. Mm-hmm. And really rarely is the way we are called to on an extreme. And so I think one of those things starts with, again, looking back at what are the core narratives that we're believing. And are we falling into this trap of hearing what we believe to be true and reinforcing that and only that? Or are we finding some balance and counterbalance to all this?
Yeah.
I think some of the things I mentioned have some role as an antidote to that, as far as having performance or capacity-based fitness in our pursuit of looking at what are we able to do with our bodies. I think how you phrased it is really important in saying we start to celebrate the high capacity in and of itself. And that needs to start with a celebration of what we've been gifted and use that as a starting point. And so really the gift has already been given to us. And that is life, that is a body that can do whatever it can do, and being really real with whatever that is. And then the celebration is in the progress along that line. So our whole approach in the Christian walk is trying to get closer and closer to unideal. So it's really important about what we're setting our ideal to. And what I think you're mentioning is if we set the ideal to the wrong thing, right? If we set the ideal to the person who is the fittest or looks a certain way or can do all these things, and any time we have a really strong idea of the ideal, it's probably worth checking what that is. The ideal we're actually called to is not actually a final destination or final threshold. It's actually a process that we're called into. And now I'm talking about the Christian life and the model we're given on how to pursue or how to progress through life. So I think that's really important. If we have created a finish line that we are super committed to say, that is what perfection looks like, and I'm going to get there, something's actually gone wrong, because the celebration is in the process of getting there. And our goal or ideal that we're pursuing should actually transcend our own individual pursuit. And so I think that's one major part of it, is what are we setting as the finish point and how aggressively are we pursuing those? Just like with anything else, indicators of those things are how much time are we investing into this, right? If you like, how we invest our time is very indicative of where our values are. And so if you are someone on that route, and I would categorize myself as someone who could fall into that trap as, putting this a false ideal as that. One thing I need to be doing is saying, how much time am I actually investing into this? And is that time investment aligned with what I really think about my health and fitness and my pursuit of that? Or has that deviated from that and has now become obsessive or something outside of that realm? just like how we might look at other factors into how we're investing into things and how that might reflect. Or attention. When I get up in the morning, am I going to the bathroom and concerned about how I look and all those things? Those are all things we need to be aware of to know if we're like falling off the path. And so I think awareness is one of the bigger things to bring that balance back. On the flip side, it's tragic to me when I hear people view our physical bodies or pursuit of improving that as pure vanity, just because it feels so obvious to me in scripture and in what that looks like that Jesus really cares about us now.
Yeah.
And that includes our physical health. And that's not even and I want you to be fit. I want you to get the most out of this life we've been given, right? Like our physical health is the foundation to which our quality of life is going to be pretty dependent on one way or another. And so recognizing that as a gift, I think, is the healthier position to start from. That we have actually been given something that then we get to steward. And not that we are totally in control of shaping all of these things into becoming this perfect version of ourselves. And, we can do that all on our own. There is a lot that we can control with our physical health in our habits and our decisions. There's also plenty that falls way outside of that. I think anyone who's listening to this would be able to recall someone who something medically or physically happened to them that had nothing to do with their decisions or lifestyle factors, right? Yeah. Whether that is an illness, whether that's a cancer or a disease that comes on, whether
chronic
that's
condition,
chronic condition, a genetic condition that you have no control over, or a traumatic accident where suddenly capacity is diminished rapidly and in an instant. Those are all things to consider. And so sometimes I actually think about this is maybe a little tangential of if one of those things were to happen to me and all of a sudden I couldn't do all these things that I really highly value, what is actually at the core of my view of my health and fitness and how that contributes to my life? I am grateful to be in a position at my age and the health that I'm in that I can pursue PRs in this and set sights on doing cool activities out here. It could be that tomorrow I'm in an accident, can't move my arms and legs. And even for that person or that version of me, physical health matters. That's going to look way different. And if I'm living in alignment, the core of me today and the potential me that could lose all of that tomorrow, that should actually be the same on like what physical health means and what that allows us to do. Yeah, I think it all starts with a lot of awareness and gratitude and recognize that this is a gift that we've been given. And a lot of times you don't have a lot of control over those things. At the same time, right, as our life is full of dichotomies, we also do have a lot of say and agency over improving that. We need to take ownership and responsibility for what we can do.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about the college experience, particularly I'm thinking about like stress and college, because we hear that all the time. College students are under a lot of stress, especially around like exam season or times of transition where, anybody I think would have kind of a heightened awareness of like, oh, this is really overwhelming, or I'm not doing my best right now. What role does movement or exercise play in emotional and spiritual health, especially in those stressful seasons? And how do you imagine that coming alongside a student as they're navigating some of those more stressful moments?
Yeah, really good question. In one word, critical. Yeah.
You're like, yes.
Extremely overlooked, honestly, in what that does. And it's not just about the working out. It's, again, about recognizing that this is all an integrated system. So we talk about stress, and lots of things can contribute to stress. Like you mentioned, we can have stress from classes, putting a lot on our schedule. We can have pressure from ourselves or external expectations that add stress. Working out is a stress, like that adds stress to our body. It's just in a different way. And so a lot of the times I think we jump to how do we decrease the stress? In a college setting, and if you are pursuing, especially on the campuses that we've been on, like when you're pursuing those things, that's not a great answer oftentimes because you don't have a lot of control to actually decrease the stress. And so there's a whole other side of the equation that should probably be looked at a lot better or a lot more closely. And that is, what is our recovery looking like? And so to use the analogy for for training. Overtraining, bad. We're on an unsustainable path, and we're going to lead to injury and burnout and all these things. Overtraining, though, is really just a symptom of an imbalance between our training and our recovery. And so you can either decrease your training or you can increase your recovery. And so I would encourage a lot more college students, and not just students, people on a college campus, to actually look at to what they're doing to increase their recovery. And working out or physical fitness is something that kind of bridges those things, because yes, it is a stress, but it plays a critical role in the regulation of a lot of our bodily systems and functions to help the recovery go up.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I think we can all agree or recall a time where getting out and moving felt like a release. And that's not by accident. That's because of what happens with cortisol and all these things going on in our body. Moving has a release of these things and helps us regulate some of those functions. And so purely as an outlet, there's some function. But then you get into a lot more important stuff, like it helps you sleep better at night, and it helps regulate your appetite, and it helps you set into rhythm some of these other habits. And that's where it really compounds fast. And so sure, it's a workout, but really it's a gateway to a lot more healthier habits to go with that. I think a lot of students I've interacted with, and you guys have probably interacted with, just feel really overwhelmed. But if you were to ask them like what needs to get cut out, that's probably a harder question to answer, right? Like very rarely is it are college students in a position to, or actually have a desire to decrease what's on their plate. There are cases for sure where you need to take some stuff off your plate.
But it's often like a vague overwhelm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then it's like really what is overwhelming is they don't know how to prioritize or to triage the stressors in their life. And working out and having a foundation of quality sleep, quality movement, quality nutrition is going to put you in a better position to filter and prioritize what is going on in your life. And that, for me in my college career, thinking back on my time, if I wasn't doing that, I would have been way more stressed. And simply because it gives you, just like any other rooting practice, it gives you a starting point to then let other things filter in.
Yeah.
Too often, I think for students, prioritizing their physical fitness becomes just one of the to-do list items, when in reality that should be one of the anchor items. And set that into your core rhythm and core schedule, and then build around that, because really you do have the time for it. And everything's going to be better for it, more importantly.
Yeah. Focus increases, productivity increases. Yeah,
Totally.
It's definitely has overwhelmingly positive impacts. You've hinted at this multiple times, but I know that in your work as a trainer, you talk often about this idea of virtuosity and this concept being something that connects, almost like a web, all of the values that you hold most dearly that manifest in your relationships, in your career, in your physical fitness, in the way you interact with people, in your ministry, in your church life, in your worship. Can you tell us a little bit more about virtuosity, and what do our bodies have to do with virtue and purpose?
Yeah. Through this conversation so far, I think these themes of purpose, integrity, and virtuosity have been apparent. And so to kind of provide a framework on how to understand how virtuosity files in there, purposes are why, right? The reasoning why we pursue things, why we do certain things. Integrity is really the what. Like that's what we're after, an integrated life or a life with integrity. And so virtuosity is the how. And virtuosity taps into how are we pursuing these things to achieve integrity and leading with purpose. So that's what's driving us. And so virtuosity ties this idea of virtue. Maybe we're more familiar with the term like virtuoso. This says a principle kind of treads the line. But really the core piece of that is the fact that it is in pursuit of a high standard in its like basic definition, virtuosity. Where I was introduced to it with training is actually the comparison of how it's used in gymnastics and in sport, and how virtuosity is defined in that is really two ways. It's doing the common uncommonly well. So doing the common uncommonly well is a mark of virtuosity or mastery of a task or a skill. And secondly, it is the relentless pursuit of excellence. And those two things together, I think, tap into the full scope of why that is a reasonable or helpful way to pursue integrity with this idea of purpose in place. We got into earlier a little bit talking about how we do anything is how we do everything, or the details matter in the context of things like nutrition, but also Christian living. We are called to look at the details, right? Like if we look at Jesus' life and what he did, it was actually built on a foundation of very simple and repeated habits, but done at an extremely high quality. One of my favorite chapters in scripture is Luke 22, is particularly the passage that talks about this scene in Gethsemane, which is right before Jesus' trial and everything. It's a very, very intense and dramatic scene. And it can be easy to overlook what that's built on. And when we look at that passage, it first talks about how, like, as was his custom, he went to go pray. So like we can already start off with, this was something built into Jesus' rhythm that he did a lot. Then we get this model, and we have lots of models of what that prayer looked like, or communion with God or time with God looked like. And we see the quality to which that was approached with. We get to see just how high of quality that time with God really is, as far as vulnerability, humility, submission, but also honesty and confidence, being empowered by God and all these things. And that is built on this foundation of doing the common prayer uncommonly well and having like true actual connection with God. And so on that component, we see the scriptural backing for all of this. In our physical lives, this is also true. And we see this actually in every aspect of life. And doing the common uncommonly well is going to pay dividends down the road. In our relationships, can we do the common thing of connecting and having conversation and checking in or caring or listening? Can we do those to an uncommonly well degree, to a really high quality degree? Surely you talk to any expert or any of us relationally, and we know that like doing those common things uncommonly well are going to benefit.
Yeah.
Same thing is true within training. If you do the common things of eating and sleeping and moving with purpose and intent and to a really high quality, you just get dividends back on what that provides for your quality of life and quality of physical health. And so that's that connects a lot of things, as you said, with this idea of integrity and everything, because it brings our attention all the way from the micro scale and progresses up to the macro scale in a really rich way that I think ties a lot of the themes we see in scripture and the model of Christ's life. So that's one really critical point. The other piece of virtuosity, which is the relentless pursuit of excellence, is what allows for that scale to go from the micro to the macro in a sustainable way. And it's really critical here, I think, to point out the difference between relentless pursuit of excellent versus excellence. And excellent, going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, is when we set the bar at a fixed level and have just set that as the ideal. And if that's our model, we have just this objective finish line we're pursuing that runs into some problems. If that is the checkpoint, it is possible that we could be too far from that checkpoint to be compelled to pursue that ideal.
Yeah.
That's very problematic. That's problematic in any aspect in any of our health, but using the example of that in our physical health, if you just think you're too far away from what it means to be fit or healthy, you're not going to be compelled to pursue health and fitness. That's very problematic. The other issue is if you get to that checkpoint, there is nothing driving you further to that. And there's also nothing rooting in that if that's stripped away. And so we need to replace a linear checkpoint, just this flat level, with a scalable approach, like something that can actually meet us where we are and lead us forward. And so that's where the pursuit, and the emphasis is really on the pursuit of that, of excellence comes in, because that is infinitely scalable. And this ties a lot to how in scripture we're given this model of like walking the path with God, and how no matter how far down the path you are, you're actually always one decision from either being off, but also you're only one decision from being back on. And that's exactly what that ties to. Are you back on the path of pursuing excellence to continue to go through that. And I found that for myself to be extremely compelling as a model to pursue everything. And I think health and fitness or physical training is just a really tangible way to see that come into play. Can you bring attention to the small things you're doing and always be in pursuit of something of higher quality and more deeply rooted to what you're actually after? Are you aligning your actions with the values that you've stated is really where that comes from. Also, I've seen that pay dividends with people I've worked with clients and with athletes and members of the gyms that I've worked at, of this relentless pursuit of excellence, finally giving a model that is compelling and sustainable. It really does tie in everything, and it gets me fired up because I've seen it work so well. And that's not my idea, obviously. Like, that's tied into much deeper truths we've seen for ages and through the wisdom of many generations before us. But it works, and that's why it works.
I love that. I love that imagery of a journey instead of just reaching a destination. There is no achieving in the spiritual life nor in any other facet of life. Thank you for that.
So, Jonathan, I'm wondering, what advice would you have for college students who want to start caring for their bodies, whether that be through fitness or nutrition? Let's say they're like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. I really want to, but they just don't know where to get started. Like, what would be your advice for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll give another framework to kind of think about this on. This is a principle within training that we use, and it's a principle called core to extremity. And so when we are training movements that produce a lot of power or expression of power, we must abide by the principle of core to extremity. What that means in movement is that our core, like center of mass, is able to produce a lot of force, but a really low velocity. And as we kind of cycle out to the periphery, the force decreases, but the velocity increases. The reason I bring that up is because oftentimes I think college students and all of us really fall into the trap of trying to fix the things that we can fix quickly at the fault or with the mistake that those are not with a lot of force. And we would be much better off, or college students would be much better off on really paying attention to what are the core things, their core values, their core narratives that actually have a lot of force in their life, but are going to take a lot more work to fix because they don't have a lot of velocity and they're not going to see the fast switch with that.
Yeah.
And so just like with anything, the first thing is to take inventory of what are your operating values within this? What are the operating narratives around your health and fitness? And that needs to be super real. Like, that needs to be very honest on what you've told yourself about what you can do, what you have access to, what you're able to do, what you have time for is probably maybe the biggest one for college students. And you need to be really real about that and checking that those things are truthful, for one, and two, what you actually want to be pursuing.
Right.
Because whether or not you know it, those core values or core things are going to be guiding how you move and how you act through this life, and are going to dictate how much force or power you can express, meaning how efficiently or how productively you can actually show up. So that'd be my first piece of advice, is pay attention to really what's at the core.
That's really profound. Thank you for sharing that. What do you wish more Christian parents understood about how care for the body and faith interact in their kids' lives today? And how can they help their young adult foster this in their lives, especially with this idea of core to extremity?
Yeah. One of the biggest benefits I continue to see is, again, coming back, that physical activity and fitness and movement is a common language. And so one of the biggest hurdles I see parents with their children going through, especially as children are stepping into college or emerging into adulthood, it is a disconnect in communication, right? Our viewpoints are changing, our priorities are changing from what once was to what will be. And so we kind of need a common language. And fitness can be that, and movement can be that, because that's going to apply to both the parent and the child, or to anyone. Like, really, there are really core things that are going to apply to both of those. Our health and fitness is a very tangible way to see if our values and actions are aligned with one another. And so I think from a parent's perspective, if you're seeking to gain credibility with your child or adult child, is to align that. that is going to give security is when actions and intent are aligned or actions and values are aligned. And so if you want them to prioritize health and fitness, which every parent does because they want their children to be healthy, you should be doing that. Again, you need to be doing that to have credibility and validity to what you're saying.
Right.
It also needs to come with understanding and caring, compassion for actually hearing what that is and being willing to understand that's going to look differently for different people. But I think it's a great avenue to pursue as differences might start to get amplified, that there's a very powerful common ground that can be in health and fitness. And I know for myself and all of my friends, even as we might get to places where our viewpoints or worldview looks different than our parents', we want our parents to be healthy. And we know that their emotional health and mental health and everything is directly connected to their physical health. And so it goes both ways for sure in what parents want for their children, what children want for their parents. Right. And it can really, really foster that bond between them.
Yeah. I love that, using fitness and caring for oneself as a connecting point. I like the way you put that, as differences between an emerging adult and their parents start to amplify, that this is a really great connecting point. So I think that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. We loved this conversation. Really enjoyed touching on all of these different components of how faith and fitness and exercise and nutrition and caring for oneself all converge and can actually help us experience God more and be in community with others. So thank you for the conversation.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. This is a topic that has driven the direction I've taken for my career and what I feel vocationally. So I'm always excited to talk about it. So just thanks for having me, and thank you guys for what you're doing on a greater scale for college students and emerging adults.
Thank you, Jonathan. I have been personally blessed by the way that you prioritize the holistic flourishing of others. And so just feel really grateful for the ways that you minister and work for other people's health. So thank you.